If, like me, you've been building stations since the release of Trailblazers, chances are you have a bunch of stations that are producing nothing but biowaste scattered across the galaxy. And you might be wondering, why? Why is that? Even with the recent clarifications from Frontier Development about the fact that markets are currently affected only by the so-called local body infrastructure, there's a lot of confusion with regards to how you can specialize station economies and make them produce things that you want them to produce. Maybe it's metals, maybe it's agricultural products, maybe it's military equipment, whatever it may be. So, what we're going to be doing in this video is try and summarize the current state of the art as far as our knowledge is concerned as to how the specialization of station industries work presently in the game as of March 27. The knowledge here gathered is the sum collection of what the Xenostrike Force team has been studying, of what the colonization chat in the Canon Discord has been reporting on, which has been very helpful. Thank you to all those who contributed there. It includes a bunch of test data provided by people following my live stream, so thank you for that input as well, and my own personal investigations. So that's your source. I fully expect this information to become obsolete as Frontier Development makes necessary changes to the way the system works. So at some point, I actually plan to hide this video from my channel, as inevitably it will result in being misleading once things change. But as of it today, and for the time being, this is how we understand things to work, and I will do my best to explain what we know as a reasonable fact versus what we have a hint of being how things specifically work, and finally what we are just speculating on and we just don't know. So, station economies. First and foremost, what are we talking about and how do they even work? The most important thing to understand when it comes to station economies is this concept of the local body. So, for system economy specialization, what matters is a planet and what is built on that planet and its immediate orbiting slots and what is built in those immediately orbiting slots. What is built in the main sort of body, what is built in the orbit of gas giants, no effect. Doesn't matter. What is built in the orbit of a main star, no effect. Doesn't matter. Those are going to be addressed by FDev at a later point with regards to like what kind of effects they might take up. But as of today, the things that are built in orbit of planets that have no landable, no buildable slots, or gas giants, or stars have very limited ways to specialize their economies, specifically limited to what can be built in their orbits. And we'll get to that in a minute. But because the main way to specialize economies, as we'll see in a second, is by building planetary settlements, if you want to build a station that has a defined economy, chances are you will want to select and build it in orbit of a planet where you can actually build stuff on. Something like this. Furthermore, if you're trying to specialize things, whereas it is possible to specialize stations that have their own inherent economy, it is, for a specific reason that we're going to get into, a lot easier to specialize industries that start with the economy type. So if you're configuring a primary port, all tier 2 and tier 3 star ports except the asteroid base start with the economy, with a colony economy type. So each of these 3 stations can be specialized easily. The asteroid base starts with extraction as an economy, and furthermore needs to be built around an asteroid belt. A rocky or icy ring. So it's a special case that I think is beyond the point of this video. So forget asteroid bases for the time being. Let's talk about tier 2, tier 3 stations. Outposts are a bit tricky because there's 2 types of outposts that are colony type. Specifically, the civilian outpost is colony type, and the commercial outpost is colony type. So these 2 follow the general rules of specialization that apply to the tier 2 and tier 3 space stations. The other outposts instead already have an economy of some kind, like the industrial one and the military one, and the scientific one is high tech, and so on. So these again are a bit of a special case and behave differently, and we'll get into that for a moment. Again, if you're willing and looking to specialize your economy, start with a colony type space station in orbit of a planet that allows for building of things. This makes systems that are planetary, by the way, kind of more viable because, as you can see, the primary port indicated by the flag in the system here, in this system, is around the star. Furthermore, this system has no planets whatsoever. So, like here, you would need to specialize the port by using the space slots around the star. And even then, we haven't necessarily tested that specializing it this way around the star works. So your marriage may vary. Something to consider. If you're looking, again, to specialize a port, see if we can find a system that actually has some planets around here. This might be actually the one that we're looking at earlier. View system map. Wow, it's like also like no planets in this channel. 5 stars. Nice. Someone give me a system map with planets, please. All right, finally, this one has. So this one, for example, has a primary port in orbit of a planet that has 2 buildable slots and further has an additional space slot. So this is a decent one to kind of like start and build either a quarterly or a commercial outpost in orbit of this, or if you hate yourself that much, even a tier 3 station like an Orbis, if you're willing to haul the 240,000 tons of metals to build one, but that's entirely up to you. So anyway, this is the basis of how to specialize economies. Again, it's all about the local body. It's all about what you can build on a planet and in the slots immediately directly related to the planet. So there is a question as to whether you can specialize quarterly or other economy type station using only space slots. And the answer to that question is actually yes. And we have proven it with the station that I'm at here, called Great Depot. In this case, we built a space farm right next to this one, and really nothing else because the infrastructure hub, the refinery hub that is on the planet is still being built, so this does nothing. All this thing has is a space farm right next to it. And as you can see by looking at the market is actually showing agricultural products. So just by using a single space farm in the same planetary orbit of this Coriolis, we managed to get agricultural products in the system. Even though the system, the commodity market still says colony. This is generally true of systems that are 50-50 of 2 market types. It will only show the first market in the order. So how do you see in actual real game data that we have managed to specialize this market to be agricultural in addition to colony? You have to go to your journal file, and you can Google how to actually find where your journal file is. But once you do manage to find your journal file, you can bring it up. And the keyword you want to look at, which I'm bringing up here on screen right now, is this station economies word that shows up in the log when you dock at a station. Like this is me docking at Great Depot, which is a station that we're at, in the as shown in the player journal file. If you look at station economies, which is an array, it will show 2 economy types. It will show colony, which has a proportion of 0.5, and agriculture, which also has a proportion of 0.5. This is the confirmation from the journal file that this station has adopted from the space farm the 50% ratio of its agricultural economy. This ratio changes as you build more things in a certain direction. So for example, if you have 2 refinery hubs under a Coriolis and nothing else, this ratio is going to be 100% or 1.0 refinery, and it will stop selling refinery products, or it will stop selling bio-waste and hydrogen fuel. We don't know whether there's a benefit to going higher in terms of proportion of industry type. We're studying the data regarding whether that contributed to like a greater degree of market supply. But right now, I think the working hypothesis is that it doesn't. All it does is it determines whether the particular market shows up or not in the station. It is possible to have more than two markets. I have personally seen and actually tested that free markets are possible. I've seen stations that have free markets. I actually think I have the name of a station that has free markets somewhere, which is actually a very interesting system. Let's see if we can actually bring it up so that I can show you, not tell you, because like, why take my word when you can actually see the reality in game. So let me get rid of that. And the system is Yades sector AVP B52. Actually, there's an even closer one that has free systems, which is C211, somewhere around here. There you go, C211. So this one has a port, which last time I checked had Sheila, Sovereignty, Sheila Sanctuary. There's another third port somewhere. It might be Sheila Sanctuary. No, it wasn't this one. Yeah, it was somewhere on some other side of it. No, some other part of the system, I think. Pre-sprite. Look at this. Three economies. Extraction, refinery, and high tech. So it is possible to have up at least up to three markets. Is it possible to have four? We don't know. We're trying. We're experimenting, building, trying to see if we can get a core with four markets. That would be fun, but we don't know if four is possible. We do know that three is possible, so long as you can kind of keep the ratios in a way that they show up. Now, I don't know if there's a limit, like there's a minimum ratio that a market needs to have to show up in the economy. But right now, what I've seen is so long as a particular economy shows up at all, it will show in the market, and the market will sell those applicable products. Now, keep in mind, planetary ports like the one I'm showing here are a special case because planetary ports are currently bugged. They only sell up to 3 commodities each of the relevant markets, but no more than 3 commodities. Why they don't sell before range, I don't know. I think it's a bug. But again, it's one of the things that will need to be fixed over time. Helpful to you to keep in mind, however, because again, right now, you can't really build economy-specified planetary ports because they don't work, period. So as of right now in the game, you probably will want to focus on space stations if you want specialized economies, because those do work, even with a very sort of convoluted and constrained criteria that apply to them, but at least they provenly work and consistently work, whereas planetary ports don't. So for the time being, suggestion, don't build planetary ports. Now, going back. So how can you specialize stations and economies as we were talking about? So one way to do it, as we showed, is by building space assets right next to them and have them inherit their applicable industry. But the more common way to do it is to use planetary installations to accomplish that. And an example of doing that, and the planetary installations that are more specifically geared to doing that, are tier 2 planetary hubs. So specifically, refinery hubs are key because there is no such thing as a refinery settlement of any tier, nor there is no such thing as a refinery installation, space installation of any kind. So if you want a refinery economy anywhere, you need to build refinery hubs. That's your only choice. So once you build a refinery hub, then if you have like a Corellian in orbit, then this will take up the economy type of refinery at a 50% ratio, as we discussed. So this is 50% colony, 50% refinery. And if you look at what it produces the beautiful whole range of metals that you would expect a refinery to produce. So this is how you specialize using hubs and ground ports. Now, it is possible. It is possible to, let me see if I can find it. Specialize an economy using settlements instead of hubs. And I have an example that I'm going to show you, because like each and every one of these things like has specific and dedicated example. So this is an example of a commander who has created a Coriolis station, aubergine orbital, in orbit of a planet that has exclusively agricultural settlements, no hubs. By the way, agricultural hubs don't exist for the sake of argument. So if you want an agricultural economy, you have to use either settlements or space farms. He has 3 agricultural settlements on the planet and a Curly in orbit, which by the way has no slots for space farms, so he didn't even have the option to do that. And this station is 100% proportion agricultural. So that's, again, one way to get an agricultural economy. Now, he still has slots on the planet, so theoretically he could build an industry hub and make it 50-50 industry hub versus agricultural, but I mean, it's up to him. What I will say is the ratios of how settlements and hubs affect stations are still under investigation. We do know that a hub contributes a ratio of 50%. So one refinery hub means 50% economy contribution towards refinery. The same is true for space farms. Space farms are 50% agriculture. The other factors, like how individual settlements affect economies, we don't have the best data on. So we're not specifically able to say a tier 1 or tier 2 settlement contributes such and such percentage. The only thing we can tell you is what we observed. Like, for example, this planet with its free settlements, free agricultural settlements, has a 100% agricultural economy. So these 3 settlements contribute 100% agriculture in aggregate. But how much the individual do, we don't know. An additional thing to note, which is kind of unfortunate, but it's a reality that you also need to be aware of, is as far as stations are concerned, stations only pick up all these economic factors if they are tagged to be in the slot 0 of the system, which usually is the closest one, but not always is the closest one to a planet. But there are situations where Coriolis are built and they are in slot number 1, and they do not pick up station economies, and that is another bug, and a kind of a big one that you kind of need to be aware of. And let me see if I can find you an example system where that is true. Actually, I have an image that Commander Xarian created and shared with support, and support actively confirmed that this is a known issue. So let me just pull it up as a chart. Give me 1 second. Eco, there we go, this one. Okay. This is the chart. I'll make it a little bigger so you can see it. So basically, he has a refinery on the planet, but for whatever reason, his Coriolis got built in orbital slot 1. And as a result, his Coriolis does not have the influence from the body, from the refinery, even though there's nothing else around here, whereas things that end up in orbital slot 0 do. This is a known bug. There's no workaround right now. Make sure you build orbital stations in slot 0 is the only thing that we can recommend, and pray that they don't end up in the wrong slot because of a slot placing bug. But again, as many of you in the comments love to remind me, this is a beta, so things like this happen. I'm just giving you information we have, and wish you luck if you want to partake in the sometimes excruciating experience that is trying to make this all work. So back to us. So we talked about how you can specialize an economy using space installation. We talked about how you can specialize it using planetary installation and the role that hubs play in that regard and the percentages that they apply. We talked about the fact that kind of nothing else in the system matters. In that degree, the economy type of the system also doesn't matter at all right now in the game. Like it's just a visual indicator of like how many facilities of a given type you've built in a system. It's often wrong. By the way, most of the system summary data is wrong in this view. If you want a more accurate view of the system summary, you need to go in this tab here at the very left of the system. And this actually has more up-to-date information than the system view has. Don't ask me why, and don't ask me why this information is not updated in the system view, but it isn't. So again, if you want the most up-to-date information on your system, look here. Don't look in the system map. What else do you need to know? So we're talking about multiple industries. You talked about how you can specialize things. One thing that we're still testing and that we don't really know is what happens if you place more than one station that can be specialized in a particular location. So let's say that you built, actually we have an example of that, which is unfortunately bugged, so it's not a great example, but it's the best example of what we got to kind of show you. So let me see if we can show you that. So what happens if you do like we did in the zoo, which is you create an orbit station or another station that can be at least of colony type in orbit of a planet, and then you decide to create a planetary port on the planet itself. Right now, for whatever reason, none of these two stations are picking up industry types, so they're both colony types and only producing biowaste, so there's something bugged about them. But generally, right now in the game, I want to say this is a bad idea. As in, it's unclear whether settlements and hubs contribute to only one port, like the closest one, or they contribute to every port around the so-called local body. And in some cases, like in this case, they don't seem to contribute at all when they have more than one port. So this is broken and this doesn't work. So right now, my personal advice would be do not build more than one colony type thing in orbit or on a planet because it doesn't work. In fact, I would say don't build colony type planetary ports at all because they don't work. They're limited to 3 commodities regardless of what you build around them. You can build colony type stations. These do work, but if you do, I would highly, highly discourage building more than one because things get really funky and start breaking pretty bad if you do. Or at the very least, we don't really understand how things work with more than one station in a local body system. So, in fact, if you want to go and do it and gather some data, knock yourself out, go do it, gather some data, and let us know what you find out. And I think that's it in terms of like one last thing. Production volumes. So one thing we have been doing, and I actually have another sort of like screeny that I can pull up, is we started gathering some data in terms of how different factors contribute to how much systems produce. Because even after you built something, you obviously want it to make goods, and how many goods are made depend on a variety of things that we are still studying in detail, but we have a general idea of how they at least directionally kind of start to work. So let me see if I can pull this up and give you a sense. So this is a spreadsheet and kind of cut out so you can actually see the result. Let me see if I can pull it so that you can. I'm kind of like doing, wrong one. All right, see if I can move it. Keep moving the wrong thing. Charts. All right, move it. All right, so here you can see we're taking supply of cobalt for refineries because nobody cares about cobalt, and as a result, supply is pretty stable. But we're trying to study and see how it correlates. Like the current working hypothesis is that supply is affected by two things. It's affected by system development level, which is one of the stats of a system that increases as you build more things, typically tier 2 and above facilities, although a bunch of tier 1 facilities also give some system development level. And there we have some examples of stations that have otherwise identical stats, but where the supply is directly related to a system development level. So there's a belief that supply increases as system development increases. And then there's another hypothesis that has to do with population affecting it. But again, we haven't really nailed the exact formula as for how supply increases with population and system development level. And then there's some outliers like Commando Falcon's Elite Station, which has high population and high system development level, but abysmally low supply of cobalt. And we're studying why that is. So the bottom line is, as you can tell, we haven't really figured out the exact production formula. We're still studying it. And again, if you want to contribute some data in the sys colonization chat for Canon or in the XSF or XI Discords, we'll take it. Generally, it looks like the higher system development level, the higher the population, the more your system and station will produce. But again, there's exceptions, and that may not always be the case. We also don't know if this gets divided among stations. That might be a thing. We're studying it, and we're trying to learn more. That's it. That's really the state of the art as far as colonization is concerned, and what we know about the system and how it works as of today. And as always, if you enjoy this content, please consider liking, subscribing, and activating the notification bell, which will tell you when I go live or when I publish new content. And that's a fantastic way to show your support, and it means the world to me. So thank you very much for watching and for your support. Go to Mankind, Commander Mechan, over and out.